Hello, this is for my new friends in the Horn of Africa. It's about the regulatory carbon market in Brazil, the MBRRE, which is just being voted through the Congress in Brazil, and I wish to tell a little bit about it and how we foresee it to increase our competitiveness on the global carbon markets. All right. So since we are working on the subject right now, I would like to tell you a few words about the Brazilian regulatory market in Brazil, and I think it serves everyone that looks into buying carbon credits from Brazil, and also every developing country or developing enterprise or enterprise in developing countries that are willing to join those markets. I hope this can help you to understand how it operates. Okay, so the regulation of the Brazilian market for the reduction and removal of greenhouse gases, the MBRRE, it was already provided for in Law 12187 from 2009, which created the national policy on climate change. And two factors are really important when you're having a regulatory market in your country or your region. Firstly, you need a national strategy to instruct the carbon sector in your country, and we need this here in Brazil. And secondly, you need to review your positions if you are in the developing world, which used to be based on fighting anthropogenic land use in the tropical regions, and this is far from the truth. So we have to review that position, and we have to structure our strategy to go into global markets. The national strategy for the Brazilian regulatory market, it can cope to organize the sector and contributes to the country's industrialization and economic growth, while taking advantage of our natural capital to generate green jobs. Until today, Brazil has claimed space through the sale of carbon credits, decoupled from products and services and delivered to companies outside the country, which becomes a right to pollute in the buyer's territory. For example, a company that manufactures solar panels in Europe can purchase carbon credits from Brazil to produce even more solar panels sold to Brazil. So it happens that the company is polluting too much, and it needs to increase its production, and then the government comes and says, no, you cannot, you're not allowed. And then he comes and says, okay, here are carbon credits from Brazil. And then they say, all right, then you can go on. And he increases its production, sell it to Brazil, and the Brazilian gain more credits for that, and sell back to the European so they can produce even more. So the buyer of the credit in Europe increases its industrial production based on the credits from Brazil. And the Brazilian company that brought the solar panels generate carbon credits from the reduction of greenhouse gases emissions, which are sold back again to the company in Europe, which increases its panel production. Once again, it's a virtual cycle for the European solar panel manufacturer, which still receives incentives. We gotta remember this within the region, because he is producing environmental goods which will benefit the environment in the countries that acquire it. The same logic may be part of Brazilian national strategy to operate in global carbon markets. That is, buyers of goods and services from Brazil will receive carbon credits associated with the products they purchase. With these carbon credits tied to purchases, buyers can reduce their greenhouse gases emissions associated with purchasing these goods and services, which automatically eliminates the need to purchase other credits to offset their emissions. A virtual cycle that the Brazilian regulatory market can help to implement in Brazil, aiming at the international carbon trade that is being formed in the world and focusing on the consumption as a factor to incentivize our green industry. Secondly, at the time the national policy on climate change was drafted, as well as later in a variety of laws, decrees, and normatives in Brazil, as well as in adoption of various programmatic actions in the country which involved multi-billion dollars investments, it was believed that the anthropogenic use of land was causing an increase on greenhouse emissions, and which is wrong. At COP26, it was clearly established that the contribution to the increase on greenhouse gases emissions comes from the burning of fossil fuels. And anthropogenic land use is a solution to the climate crisis. It's in the text of the pact. There was no mention in the agreement on emissions originating from the conversion of tropical forests to other uses by human action, giving the evidence that it leads to an improvement in photosynthetic performances and ultimately a removal of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, transformed into biomass that goes into proteins, grains, and fibers of different forms of cultivation of the land. So the regulatory market in Brazil can then also contribute to the integration of carbon credits to all production and service sectors in the country, socio-environmentally qualifying natural products to participate in global carbon markets. The regulatory carbon market in Brazil can encourage the increase in production to participate in global carbon markets. It can encourage the increase on anthropogenic use of land in all corners of the country, promoting increases in the removal of atmospheric CO2 and transfer it to grains, proteins, and fibers. And also those grains, fibers, and proteins, they can have higher levels of carbon. We can increase the content of carbon in products maybe. The Brazilian market can also be an instrument to promote increased consumption of carbon-based products as a way of encouraging producers to always seek new technologies and forms of production in order to combat climate change. So overall, it can organize the strategy so the products will have the carbon and we will open markets for Brazil and industrialize the country based on the production of green carbon-based products. The regulatory market needs to have a strategic decision-making body, a registration and certification mechanism, and a technical panel to define methodologies and procedures for generating credits, as well as their transfer between actors and countries. The regulatory market can also foster a national market for consulting and auditing services, and generate resources to invest in innovations and updates of policies and control systems with a fund design into it. As a whole, the regulatory market will promote operations in the market before participating or interfering in them, always keeping the government in the regulation and fiscalization, inspection sector, allowing the private initiative to bring efficiency to the management and the necessary investments. It is from the spirit of cooperation between the public and private sector that the regulatory market must move, aimed at gaining competitiveness against the prepared global entrepreneurs, while organizing our internal strength. Let the regulatory market come.